gentlemen. So, Frontier Opening Bell, the midweek edition of the show. I'm Temple Ashaju. Joshua WC joins us as oil and gas analyst from Vertical Capital Management. Thank you, Joshua, for coming through. Bosin Omofaye, thank you, our executive editor here at Frontier Africa Report. And of course, let's begin as usual with the indices of the markets across Africa, the main markets that we track here. The Nigerian exchange was positive 0.15% on Tuesday. BRVM Stock Exchange down 0.31%. The EGX, the Egyptian exchange in Cairo, was also down, nose diving by 1.47%. The Nairobi Securities Exchange was positive 0.15%. And of course, Johannesburg Stock Exchange in Joburg was positive, jumping by 1.12% on Tuesday. Now let's move on to the East African headlines. And we have EAC tabling some $91.7 million budget for the full year 2021 and 2022. The European Investment Bank, EIB, is to invest some $95 million in the East Africa's geothermal projects. Ethiopia, Kenya, South Sudan commits to advance mega infrastructure development. The International Monetary Fund approves $1 billion to finance Uganda's COVID-19 response. Fitch rating is saying Kenya, Stanbic IBTC, KCB, and of course KCB Bank has got a B plus B positive rating. That has been affirmed as the outlook remains positive. Let's get your thoughts, Bosin, on these East African markets headlines and perhaps get some
Yes.
contributions from Joshua as well.
Yeah, Joshua is the banking expert. Is the banker in the house. So I'm going to defer to him when it comes to banks and the
So I apologize for the wrong
ratings
introduction earlier.
so let's leave it. Let me leave the banks to the bankers. By the way, let me stick with some of the stories. I'm very enthused when it comes to infrastructure projects such as the geothermal power projects in East Africa. The European Investment Bank. Temple, these folks are coming down to Africa because they're putting their money where they can see bankable projects that really, really make sense. So, a geothermal power project in East Africa, which most are likely will include the Turkana region in Kenya, will most likely be part of this particular project. The whole Lake Victoria, the whole of East Africa, a little bit of that into southern Africa will be very good for anyone who wants to invest. So 95 million, that's close to $100 million by the European investment banks. They
Mhm.
can see the money. They can see, wow, this will be a game changer. And then they're coming in to support such projects. This is the kind of support you like to see, Temple, in Western Africa, in Nigeria in particular. We're signing a whole number of deals, but we're not seeing these big international finance institutions like the ERB, the ERBD, and the rest of them coming through. And that is quite very not encouraging here. But I congratulate the folks in East Africa. Then they got a whole 2021 2022 annual budget together, 91.7 million US dollars put on the table. The devil is always in the details to see how this goes on each of the countries that are within the East African place. $1 billion to fund Uganda's COVID-19 response by the IMF. That's quite a whole lot of money, if you ask me, quite a whole lot. But again, the virus is beginning to get a little bit scary when you look at Uganda, when you look at Namibia, which has now been described as the epicenter of it for Africa, not even South Africa, by the way. So between South Africa and Namibia, the Zimbabweans have they've restricted movement across their own borders with South Africa because of the level 4 lockdown. So it's quite a whole lot right now down there when it comes to the issue around the virus and what needs to be done to continue to prevent an economic meltdown. Then Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Sudan committed to advance mega infrastructure. That is good news. One in the Sahel, Ethiopia is not so far in the Horn of Africa. Then you have Kenya a little bit down there. You need a whole lot more of this regional cooperation tempo to be able to get things done. So I was encouraged by in West Africa here, for example, with a kind of rail line that's going to connect through Guinea to Sierra Leone, I think to Liberia as well, to take some of the mining deposits and whatever down to the seaports. That is part of the kind of cooperation, regional economic integration, mega projects that we need on the continent. Simple.
Oh, thank you very much, Bosin. Before we cross to the West African headlines, I actually should also mention that this morning I saw on Twitter, unfortunately, you guys in Nigeria don't have access to Twitter anymore, Bosin, but I saw on Twitter earlier that Family Bank's bonds, which was raised last week, has now been listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. That event happens this morning, I think, as the
Oh,
markets
fantastic.
open. So we saw pictures of the Family Bank executives, on the
Oh,
Twitter
great.
account of Nairobi Securities Exchange. Kudos to them over there. Thanks a great deal. Let's move on to the West African and Nigerian market headlines. And Nigeria's Senate is to consider possibly pass the petroleum industry bill on July the 1st. That will be tomorrow. Multiple virus tests, restrictions, FX rates, fares dampen summer travels across the world. MTN Nigeria board meets July the 29th to okay or approve the first half 2021 results. Presco plans fresh capital raising via debt issue. Ghana is to issue 22 billion Ghanaian cedis domestic debt in the third quarter of this year, 2021. Cameroon signs memorandum of understanding to build $10 billion, dollars, 540 kilometers land port rail. That's another infrastructure project that I'm sure the boson will be able to help us deliver some insights on. But before we do that, we now have the connection back to Joshua Odebisi from Vertical Capital Management. Joshua, would you like to speak to some of these headlines and perhaps touch on the Fitch ratings on some of the Kenyan banks in the eastern part of Africa?
Well, just to briefly speak about the Fitch ratings, I mean, first of all, the truth is what we've seen on sub-Saharan banks in general is that the banking system in sub-Saharan Africa is quite strong and quite resilient, and there is quite a lot of positive upside for a lot of them, just as an investment case, and the safety of those banks and the security of those banks, I don't think should be in question. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic did expose a little bit of risk or heightened risk in some areas. However, I think Kenya, like Ghana, and a few other sub-Saharan countries did manage to get through it fairly unscathed, and so to be reaffirmed as a B plus is positive. Although they're obviously not still at the level of profitability of Nigerian banks, but for whatever reason, Nigerian banks are still undervalued in comparison. If we go down to West Africa, first of all, the promise of the passing of the petroleum industry bill, I'll believe it when I see it, to be honest with you, just because of the fact that at this point, it's almost a little bit of too little too late because foreign investors, all your international oil companies have been calling for this bill to be passed for reforms in this industry for years. And for whatever reason, all the national assemblies dragged their feet about it to the point where a lot of them have even moved on. A lot of them are looking towards renewables. A lot of them are looking towards, alternative sources of energy, while we're just trying to reform our petroleum industry. Unfortunately, it may not have the same positive effect that it would have had if this had been passed a few years ago. And on top of that, the international companies might not even still be encouraged to come into the country just due to the fact that the optics still don't work in the sense that there have still been a lot of unilateral decisions taken that have negative impacts on businesses, and those things will cause a lot of trepidation among investors. And so investors will say, sure, you passed your industry bill, but a leopard can't change their spots. If you wake up tomorrow and decide to unilaterally, fine us or do one or two things, then our profitability is in the bin and all our investments will be for nothing. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done to change the optics and to change the perception of the Nigerian market and of the Nigerian government. But definitely the PIB would be a start. So let's hope that they pass it on time.
Thank you very much. You've got a couple of other corporate headlines there. Presco, which is a listed company, MTN, any expectations from Vertical Capital Management?
Well, what I would say about MTN is that definitely from what we've seen, the company has grown from strength to strength in the Nigerian market. They are still the market leader. Market share has been great, and if you look at the report that we put out when we initiated coverage on the bank, not the bank, sorry, the telco, we have been quite positive and quite optimistic about their earnings. And so I think we believe that their H1 results are still going to be even better than what we saw in 2020, when the pandemic sort of caused a massive spike in data usage. And data is really where they've been making a lot of strides recently, because obviously a lot of people are using quite a bit of data as we are right now. So these things are very encouraging, and we expect their profitability to continue to rise. I think they are one of the most profitable companies, although their parent company in South Africa is still having difficulties with repatriating any kind of dividend. So they're not really getting to enjoy the full benefit of having such a profitable in Nigeria, just due to the fact that they can't then get out that dividend and send it back to South Africa. But for whatever reason, it is still definitely the most profitable telco right now in Nigeria. As for Presco and their plans for fresh capital, the truth is, what I would say in regard to the general agricultural sector in Nigeria is that there is a massive shortfall. What we've seen in the past few months with food inflation tells you that there is a massive agricultural shortfall. Demand far outstrips supply, and there needs to be massive investment in ramping up production, in making it more efficient, and getting to the point where we're meeting local demand and able to export internationally. And I think that Presco's plans hopefully will help them to get to a point where they are able to wrap up production and meet local demand at least to start, and then start to look at expanding exports.
Thank you very much, Joshua. I really appreciate all of those perspectives you've just shared on these key headlines before us this morning. Person, you have one or two things to add?
Well, I support Joshua completely on the PIB. The PIB is technically dead in the water, perhaps just with the exception of Chapter 1, which most likely be on governance. And like Joshua said, look, everybody's going to doubt you. If it's taking you 10, 20 years, whatever, to get just a single legislation passed, why should I believe you when you said it's been passed? So it's, a whole lot of water had passed under the bridge since then. So I spoke with an energy analyst a couple of weeks ago, and I said, look, shouldn't we just throw this deal? Let's have just another legislation, because it looks like time had overpassed the whole conversation. I ran most of the content in the PIB. By the time we're passing it, it's already dead, by the way. How soon are we going to move on to set up to have a new legislation that is forward-looking, that is 21st century, that is extremely, totally different from the brick and mortar, manually operated environment we've had so far? Again, a whole lot of the business and economic investment environment had gotten worse since this law was initially mooted. Tempo, our whole ease of doing business, the infrastructure had not gotten much better since then. Our FX situation had gotten worse than what it was. Exchange rate had gotten worse over the years since the PIB. So even if you pass it today, at what exchange rate are you looking at investments in the sector? Okay, so right now, that document, as far as I'm concerned, is just to fulfill all righteousness that we have it on the table. But as far as that is, beyond that, I'm not sure it's a game changer. But look at the Cameroonian story. Don't miss that tempo. Now, I just want to spend a few seconds because of time. This is a 540-kilometer railway the Cameroonians are building in partnership with two other firms, $10 billion thereabout. Now, what is significant about this rail is that they're building it right from where you have the iron ore deposits in Cameroon all the way to the seaport. So they're not just building railway for the fancy of building railways and making all the noise and fuss all about it and charging tickets of 2,000 naira, well, whatever, 500 CDs, whatever.
You're not using naira in Cameroon.
They're building a strategy. Sorry, I just talked about CFA front. See, they're building a strategic economic bankable project, Tempo. And that is where you find the kind of strategic investors coming through here. So are we building rail lines that will deliver, okay, that build you straight to the point? You'll still be all around building this Kaduna, Kano, Lagos about the railway line. And these guys will build strategic, economic, game-changing investment that will pay for itself. So Cameroon is looking at us and they say, what's wrong with these guys? You don't know what to do.
Both
Yeah,
in,
please go
the
ahead.
Nigerian government has also just built a rail track that will connect the Itakpe Ajaokuta steel axis, the steel city axis, to other parts of the country. And the intention is basically to help promote the movement of iron ore deposits, limestone, and the rest in that area.
The seaport is in Calabar, is in Oron, is in Delta, it is the south. We're not building strategic rails yet down to we're building more of commercial rails. We're not building industrial. The Minister of Transportation said so much. We have a whole lot. This administration is focusing on commercial railways in the main. The economically viable ones, and I mentioned this temple, look, the there are development banks around the world. Once you open up and you are true and honest to the environment and they can see it, Temple, like Joshua said, about the integrity of contracts and whatever, they will come in and build our strategic roads from Itakbe, from Kogi, Benue, whatever it, all the way to the seaport to give you raw materials to take your finished products to the seaport at the speed of light. That side by side, you can build a few commercial ones for passengers on your own, and then you're in business. But for now, we need a business game changer. When you take care of business tempo, passengers should take care of themselves. You don't reinvent the wheel. Look at the United States. The all first generation of rails built in the US was in the Midwest was not for passengers really. It's to move goods, okay, from one part of the United States to the other for development.
All right.
So that is what you
All right.
fix first. Not make me feel good, not make you good. Oh, okay, sorry. Time is.
Time is not on our side, but but just to react to one of the things that you said, I know that the government is also connecting all of those rail lines from in Lagos to the Apapa port. There has been that synergy between the NPA and the Ministry of Transport, which I know is ongoing. They probably haven't been able to actualize that, but not let because we're out of time. Let's move on to the Southern African market, and here I know Bosun and Joshua, you'll be able to speak to the petroleum industry bill in the southern part of Africa, or South Africa specifically as well. So the SARB is to keep dovish monetary policy to support growth and development, says the deputy governor there. South Africa's petroleum industry bill approval not likely until 2022. Exaro half year, first half earnings, total coal production, sales volume to decline by 11% and 9% respectively. Air Belgium Mauritius new flight connections start October the 15th of this year. In Zimbabwe, annual inflation continues to tank, dipped by 106.6% in June versus 161.91% in the month of May. And still with Zimbabwe, Mercantile Exchange, ZMX, is to launch in July, just this next month. Bosun, let's start with you before we get the thoughts of Joshua. We've got like some 5 minutes to the end of the show, though.
Yes, just about to talk on Air Belgium and Mauritius on the Indian Pacific, Indian Ocean, by the way, that the island of Mauritius. New flight collections. Everybody's looking for new game changer these days. So that is good news. It's coming through in October. Let's see how that will be changing. I spoke with a very an economist and policy analyst yesterday evening on Zimbabwe, how the sun is shining on their inflation. They're looking at a double-digit inflation anytime between now and the end of the year, from around 106.6 where they are finished off in June. The Mercantile Exchange Temple is something else you need to watch. Remember, keep an eye on your neighbor. So these guys just set up a new Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Then they're setting up a Mercantile Exchange because they've got iron, they've got ore, they've got platinum, they've got a whole lot of things. They got gold. So they're putting their mouth with their money where their mouth is. But again, here we are. We can't even fix our own national commodities exchange in Nigeria, and that's a shame. And as far as the petroleum industry bill, if you're not careful, the South Africans will pass their own bill, and they'll be ahead of the game.
Thank you very much. Thanks a great deal. Joshua, anything to say about the South Africa's Reserve Bank monetary policy dovish approach that they're looking to sustain?
Well, what I would say quickly is that obviously, um, in order to boost economic activity and sort of support growth, like you said, a dovish approach will be probably best kept for an extended period of time, because the thing about monetary policy in general is that quick changes back and forth do not do anything to help the economy. So probably they'll have to maintain this stance through the rest of the year, probably in order to start to see any kind of actionable results before maybe changing and reversing course.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Let's move on now to the Northern African markets, where the International Monetary Fund is expecting Egypt's foreign debt around 36% of the GDP by the end of the 2021 fiscal year. Egypt has also just announced tender to set up second dry port. Egypt Parliament approves the Sovereign Sukuk Act, and Morocco, Libya to hold ninth joint meeting to boost economic trade ties. Moroccan phosphate giant OCP Group gets $100 million loan from the IFC, a branch or subsidiary of the World Bank. Bosin, your thoughts?
Yeah, a quick one. The Moroccan phosphate, the OCP Group, which Nigeria signed a deal with just a couple of months ago, I think earlier in the year, is in the market to raise a couple of billions of US dollars. Now the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector lending arm of the World Bank, is giving it about 100 million US dollars. That's good news for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any contributions, Joshua? Or perhaps what Vetiva is looking out for in the fixed income and equity local markets in Nigeria today?
Well, what I'll say is that in the equity space, at least, obviously there's still quite a lot of excitement around the transition of GT to GT Holdco, and so we've seen a lot of interest from investors on that front, and that has also got passed up all the other banks as well. So definitely we're still keeping an eye out for that. In the fixed income space, you know, supply and demand is still what is driving yields at the moment. And so we're trying to see whether the federal government and the CBN will increase supply into the market, which would raise yields, in the coming months. So we're expecting that for the second half of the
Thank you
year.
very much, Joshua, or the BC from Vetiva Capital Management, banking analyst with that asset management company. I appreciate your insight on the show. Bosin Omopaye, executive editor here at Frontier Africa Reports. Thanks a great deal for helping us to keep an eye on our neighbors. I mean, that should become our catchy phrase for Frontier Opening Bell going forward, hopefully. This has been the show for today. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Temple Ashaju. We'll see you next time, and bye for now.